Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Secrets to Small Business Success and Profitability by Quicksell MAS+. Today, you're listening in using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to join over the phone, select telephone in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll have the opportunity to submit questions to Cliff by typing them into the questions pane on the control panel, and they'll be answered at the end. Cliff Quicksell Jr. MAS Plus has been involved in the promotional products and sportswear industries for the past 35 years. During this tenure, he has achieved the MAS Plus Professional Designation, Master Advertising Specialist Plus. He's been actively involved in PPAI, the International Trade Association for the Promotional Products Industry, serving on various committees as a facilitator at all PPAI and ASI shows, and as a member of PPAI's Ambassadors Speakers Bureau for over 15 years. I'll now hand you over to Cliff.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. And folks, it's really nice to be on this call. Thank God we did our prep for those of you who were on the first one that I had done. It was a little bit of a computer glitch, but I'm glad that we were able to make this work in a very successful way. And I want to thank Kate for all of her hard work and help on that. So today's webinar is 10 Secrets to Small Business Success and Profitability, as mentioned. And I just want to let you know that the reality is these are not secrets. These are things that you should be doing. And I think as we go through this webinar, you're going to sit there and say, you know what, I'm doing that, or I know that, I know this. I get this all the time during this webinar. People will say to me, well, I know that, and I know that. And the reality is, well, it's okay to know it. But the reality is, are you practicing it? Are you doing it? And I come at this from a very unique perspective in as much as I used to own a distributor company for multiple years. I've worked for some of the largest promotional companies in the industry. I was a supplier to supplier companies in the States. Worked with a lot of multi-line reps. And so I have a unique perspective on this. I don't have the only perspective, obviously, and I'm not saying that what I'm telling you here is everything that you need to know, because there's probably other things that are applicable, some things that may not work in your particular business. But I think as a general rule, what we're going to talk about today are really going to give you some finite points about how to maintain not only a successful business from a sales standpoint, but from a profitability standpoint. I'm a big believer, and I am a prophet for profitability. I preach about this all the time. I think a lot of people will get behind the idea that they're, having, $500,000 in turnover, $1 million in turnover. But yet the reality is, in some cases, their businesses aren't profitable. Some people feel, and I've had this happen. I just did a webinar the other day, and one of the key points in there is how to make maximum profitability. And I tell a story about how I make 700% gross profit on a certain aspect of the business of what we were doing. And actually, my contact called me. He goes, it was really interesting. Some multi-line rep called and said that that's like extortion. We shouldn't be making that kind of profitability. And my point is, if I come up with something unique and different and creative, and I choose to sell it at whatever price I want, it's up to the buyer to make the decision if that's a value add to them and they want to pay for it. And so I jokingly but seriously say that I've never taken a handgun to a sales presentation. I've never forced anybody to sign a contract. I present it in such a way that says, this is a creative idea, this is different and unique. If you like the concept and idea, this is the cost. And certainly they have the option to say yes or no. So as we move forward, these are some of the things that we want to try to learn today. Our learning objectives are the takeaways that we have, or basically my desired results for you, are to look at uncovering these 10 little tidbits or secrets, if you will. Secondly, to understand the value of your brand. You spend an inordinate amount of time and money creating a brand, marketing your brand. You should certainly make sure that you're profiting from that and that you understand that there is a significant value to that brand. I often ask folks, you know, and I'll get to this in another slide here pretty soon, is like, you know, if I said to you, I don't want a thing that you have to offer, but I love the way you think. I love your creativity. I love what you bring to the table. What would you charge somebody an hour for your time? What would that cost be? And I think a lot of folks don't take the time to really assess the value that they bring to the table beyond the product, beyond the products that we sell. And I can tell you that I don't know the folks that are on this call, but I know several folks in Australia. I've had the pleasure of speaking there. And I can tell you that some of you folks are remarkably creative and unique. And I think that you should really start looking at ways that you can profit from that that creative bent within your organization. Thirdly, we want to look at how do we keep this momentum going? You know, what are some of the steps that we can take that where we can actually take these points? You may look at these 10 things and say, you know what? I'm already doing 7. And if I applied these other 3, it could make a significant difference in my business. So how do we keep that momentum going? You know, sometimes it's tough. I get it. I've lived your life before. I understand. Look, I don't have the Holy Grail. I don't own the Holy Grail on ideas and everything that's out there. There's a lot to disseminate. But the reality is, you know, how do we keep that motion going so that we can see those increases, so that we can see progress? I know it is very difficult. I do understand that, but there is the ability to do that. How do we then take and, with all of that momentum, increase performance? If you're a salesperson that's on the call, how do we really take this thing, take our company to the next level? And I want to digress here and say, for the folks that are just in the sales side of it, I often looked at it when I was on that side, that my sales was like a small company within the organization that I worked in. Now, certainly there were certain guidelines that I had to follow, and we all have to do that, and I understand. But how do I take and create this company within a company to really then work side by side with the organization that I'm with? And how do I really create that momentum so that I can be a contribution, first and foremost, to myself and to my family, but ultimately to the business that I'm in? And how do we, as business owners, how do we connect with the folks that are working with us to empower them, to give them the energy that they need to go out there and really do significant things that can make a difference, not only to you as a business owner, but to their business and their life? And lastly, as I said before, the whole process here is, you know, sales is the life, well, I shouldn't say that. Sales is part of the lifeblood of your business, but profitability is certainly the thing, the driver. It's not what you can necessarily brag about that you sold, but it's what you make and how you can take your children on vacation, how you can buy nice clothing, buy a new car, things like that, so that you can, and you know, again, I'm not saying that that's the only thing in life, but certainly being profitable and it not straining you financially is actually the way or the key to go on this. So, number one of the things that really surprises me is that when I've asked the question and I've spoken globally, how many people here have a marketing plan or a business plan? And it's interesting, about 70% of the room typically will raise their hand. Oh yeah, we've got a plan. And they raise their hand and I say, okay, keep your hands up. Now, how many of you that have your hand up can tell me that your plan is written down on paper or on a computer? And literally the hands drop. And typically we find that only about 3% of the people actually have a strategic plan that they can actually look at, that they can formulate, they can work with, that they can actually make alterations to make changes to. The vast majority of the people tell me, oh, I've got it up here in my head. Well, guess what? That's not really a plan. And for those that think that it is, it's really setting yourself up potentially for failure. So if you start looking at this plan, what is your mission? What is the reason why you're there? I'm not going to go into it too deeply, but people say sometimes, I ask people, what is it that you do? What is the reason? And people say, well, I do this to make money. I would encourage you to go to TED Talks and listen to a gentleman from Canada. His name is Simon Sinek, Sinek. He does a TED Talk on why some companies have great leaders and why they succeed. It is a brilliant presentation, and he says it's the real successful people start with why. This is why we do what we do. And it has nothing about making money. It has about making change and things of that nature and doing things different. So I encourage you to do that. What does your vision look like from right now to next week to next year to 3 years out to 5 years out? What is your goal? What is your game plan? What would you like to do? Do you plan every year? Do you sit down and work a plan? Where I was this year, how did it work? How did I market myself? Where did I fall down? Where did I fail? How can I improve? If you're not doing that on a regular basis, you really are setting yourself up for failure. I work with several folks here in the States, and I find that the people that are very strategic do a remarkable job. And I'll give you an example. I have one lady that I work with. Her husband was diagnosed with a medical problem, had to leave his job. She was doing about 150,000 U.S. turnover a year. And she said to me, Cliff, I have to do things different. So we sat down and we mapped out a plan. And for the last 3 years, we've actually created a strategic plan every September, and we've gone back and she's worked that plan. And I will tell you that she did 150 grand 3 or 4 years ago at about 32% gross profit. This year, she did $800,000 in sales at over 42% gross profit. So I do know that the key to this is having that plan and working it in a very succinct manner, and also modifying it as you go along. Having strategies, whether they're quarterly, monthly, what are the tasks? And guess what? Many of you know, and I'm going to throw this in here, I used to work for Headwear USA. I was the CEO of the U.S. company. And Peter Bartlett, which many of you may know, I remember him saying to me one time, Cliff, you come to me and you ask me a question about, for instance, how to do something. And I give you the example. And I said, it's like the spoon and a shovel theory. He says, you can use the shovel and you can do it this way, and it's more successful and it's easier and it's a great procedure and you'll get it done more fast and effectively. He goes, why is it every time that I come back, you still have the spoon in your hand? And I used to think, it wasn't until later I thought about how brilliant that analogy is, that sometimes we go about doing things the hard way, that we don't have systems in place, or we're not looking at the systems that we currently have in place. And how do we modify those systems a little bit and change them, just tweak them a little bit in order for it to work more efficiently on our behalf? So have a plan and work the plan. The key to this is consistency. You can't say, I've done it 100 times one way, and then on the 101st time you do it differently and say it's okay, because the first 100 times don't matter, because that's behind you. It's being consistent and being unique in everything that you do. It's really, truly important. The next thing, physically and physically fit. As business owners, the reality is, if you're a single entrepreneur or you're a business owner or a salesperson, I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're a salesperson and you're working to provide for your family, your ability to provide is highly dependent on your physical well-being. If you are not if you feel miserable, if you downtrodden, if you're emotionally not in a good space, guess what? That's going to adversely affect the way you deal with people. Years ago, I remember my son, who's 24 now, when he was about 15 or so, he goes, "Dad, what do you attribute your success to in business?" I said, "I come first." And he goes, "Wow, that sounds kind of arrogant." I said, "Yeah, but let me finish, because it's really not." So if you look at a pyramid like you saw on the last slide, if you look at that pyramid and I'm at the top of that pyramid, it's not an arrogant thing, because if you think about it, if I'm at the top and everybody below me is affected by me, about my attitude, how I feel, whether it's spiritually, mentally, physically. If I'm not in a good space, everybody below that pyramid is affected, both either positively or negatively. My goal is to drive the most positive energy through that whole process. So I come first, my kids and my wife come second. After that come my friends and family. After that comes my business. And I believe that when I'm whole and at the top of my game, when I'm physically fit, then everybody benefits. When I'm emotionally in a good space, when I'm physically in a good space, when I'm spiritually, if you're spiritual at all, and if that's important to you, if you're in a good space, then everybody benefits. It just creates an aura. Your staff benefits. Imagine, you've probably at some point in time in your life worked for someone that they're always miserable. And they walk in the door and it's like, if you could find some place to run and hide, you just don't want to engage with that person. And that can adversely affect a business and a business model in a big way. The second thing about being fiscally fit, financially, you have to be fit. You have to be profitable. I hear a lot of people when I go to shows and, we'll talk about, sales versus profitability. I remember this one gal that I used to work with. I didn't really like the fact, she used to call me Cliffy, and that really bugged the crap out of me. And I would say, I really don't like it when you call me that, but she persisted. But, she said, "Cliffy, you're not selling enough, because, I'm selling more than you." And I go, "Well, what does that matter?" And she was like, "But, I do like $1.3 million a year in sales, and you're not doing that." I go, "No, probably will never do that. And in fact, I'll be very candid with you and transparent. I've never sold $1 million in turnover in 1 year. Never, ever." I said, "But you know what? I am doing about 960,000. So let me ask you this question. What is your profitability?" She goes, "Well, you don't understand. My clients drive my profitability, and I'm only doing it around, 28%. I said, "Well, think about this. 1.3, 1.4 million at 28%. I'm doing 960, 980,000 at nearly 60% gross profit. So do the math. It's not what you can brag about. It's what you can save, what you can put in the bank, where you can take your children on vacation, live a comfortable life is the thing that matters. So being physically and fiscally fit is critical to the success of your business. The next thing, being accountable. When we had the big bust here in 2008 in the United States, where it just went sideways. The economy just tanked. People latched onto that literally for 5 or 6 years. And they just, it's the economy, it's this, it's that, it's everything else and everybody else that's the problem. And they never stopped for a second and pointed the finger inward and said, what can I do to change? What can I do to make a difference? Now, certainly, I'm not saying that something as perverse as an economy bust or something like that. It certainly does have an effect. But if you're not looking at your business constantly and making changes and holding yourself accountable for things, like, for instance, there are people that just kind of go along when things are good. They're just cruising along and everything's great, but they're not planning for these type of things that could go sideways, that could go wrong. Think about all the terrorist issues that we're dealing with, not just in the States, but globally. If something happened to a terrorist attack happened, out of China with some of the freight that comes out of there on a super tanker, how could that adversely affect our business? What are we doing? What steps are we taking to making sure that the suppliers that we're working with are strategically thinking along the same lines that we are? That level of accountability and being very introspective is really, truly critical. I found that to be the case when working with staff, working with my suppliers, and even in my personal and family life. How do I take a step back and first look at myself and say, what could I have done different in that situation? What can I do different? How can I be a better strategic partner? And I think if we start there by pointing the finger inward, I think things would significantly change. I mean, imagine, for instance, if everybody, I know that that's kind of very idealistic, but imagine if everybody in the world decided that they were going to stop for a minute and point the finger inward and say, wow, how could I have done that? How could I have handled that situation a little bit better? And I will tell you that that type of introspective perception really does go a long way as well. The next thing is delegation. I'm sure that there are some of you on this call that feel that I can do it better and bigger and stronger and anybody else can do it. And you know what? That's probably true. But the question is, should you? There's a lot of things that we wind up doing that are costing us time, costing us profitability, are not wholesome. If you have a staff and the staff feels that no matter what they do, it's just not good enough, sometimes, that can create some true angst within a business. It was interesting. There was a company in the Caribbean island, Monster Beverage. I have a friend of mine, Dana Montenegro. I was speaking in Puerto Rico, and we were talking, and he says, yeah, it's interesting. The CEO of our company actually empowers our staff like you would not believe. I go, what do you mean by that? He says, he actually celebrates, if you can believe this, he actually celebrates and rewards staff members that fail. I said, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. He goes, and you would not believe the energy that creates within the organization. He delegates tasks. He empowers people to do their job. He trusts them to do the right thing, a good job. And guess what? He gets remarkable results. Do we fall down sometimes? Yeah. And I don't care how good you are as a business owner. I know that I try to be the best business owner I can be. But for God's sakes, I fall down all the time. Now, what would prevent someone that we have working for us or a supplier that we're working with? Are they not allowed to fall down too? So the reality is, if we're delegating this stuff out, make sure that you're working with the right people. Make sure that you're empowering the right people. Make sure that you're giving them the right training so that they can succeed. There was an author, he skips my mind, but I read this book, and this guy he's Canadian, but he's started multiple million-dollar businesses throughout Canada and North America. And he said he was actually let go from the board of directors of one of his companies. And he said he took about a 3-month respite, and he just did some research, wrote his memoirs and things like that. And he said, the one thing that I really learned is that if I had learned this when I first started, would have made me much more successful, was my ability to delegate and trust. So I encourage you to look at that. I mean, again, some of you may be doing this on a very grand scale and are doing a great job. But I ask you to be to hold yourself accountable, be introspective, and say, how could I improve on these things? And that goes for all these points that we're talking about here today. The next thing about being flexible and consistent. So certainly, taking a rigid position. Certain things that you have to take a rigid position on in terms of maybe it's your terms when you're working with your clients. But whatever you do, make sure that you're very consistent. You can be a bit flexible in certain areas, but be consistent with that. Especially with staff members, if you have multiple people working in an organization, favoritism or nepotism within an organization is something that will actually bleed an organization dry in a very, very quick time frame. So if you're going to be even-handed about the way you dole things out, in terms of if you're chastising someone or you're reprimanding someone, make sure that it's consistent across the board. Because basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create an environment where it is a wholesome environment, where people can feel that they can come in, do their job, they're empowered, that they can make mistakes, that they are not necessarily, some of you may have a hard time, I know it was tough for me to reward people for making mistakes, but at the same token, how do we teach them along the way, give them the tools, empower them to be as successful as they could be, and be consistent on every level with whomever you're dealing with within that organization. And that also holds true with how you work with your customers, how you work with your vendors, etc. So this flexibility within an organization and also the consistency that in which you do it will actually lend to a large degree to the success of your company. The next thing is about being knowledgeable, knowing your customer. It surprises me how many people they know customers a lot of times on the surface. So this goes to a lot of different veins, if you will. Being knowledgeable about knowing your customer, knowing who they are, knowing their likes, knowing their dislikes, knowing their challenges. I don't know how it works in the Australasian market, but I do know in the States that there's a huge challenge right now with transparency. Many companies can't, for instance, take a gift from a distributor company only because it may show bias or something along those lines. So do you know what the policies are of your customers? Have you even asked the question? When it comes to, we're in the business of gift giving sometimes, and we like to recognize our clients and thank them. What's your policy on that? Do you know the customer? How deep do you know your customer? How deep are you working within a customer? Most people that I know, that I work with, from the start, they are very surface driven. They have one person within an organization. It was interesting. There's one client that I work with. We have a program called Zoom Info, and we actually can drill down within an organization. And this guy had about 3 people within a hospital that he was doing business with. And drilling down into that organization, we found multiple other individuals that were buying in that organization. And when it all worked out in that organization, this gentleman now has over 66 buyers within that same hospital that he had 5 or 6 buyers in, because he started to understand where the opportunities were within that customer. So if you really want to grow your business, you have to understand your business. You have to understand the customer. I'm a big believer in driving your business from a vertical market strategy or a lateral market strategy. And that means, for instance, banking and finance, hospitality, aerospace, things of that nature. So when I had my company, we actually drove the business with 5 specific vertical markets. And we were so busy working in those 5 particular fields that I will tell you that we had no time to take on any other business that would come down the pike. So it was really important for us to be totally immersed in those 5 businesses so that our name became viral. I mean, the reality is now we live in a global society with technology that is just running rampant. I've talked to a couple of the folks there in Australasia that have told me that they've got customers in the United States. And when I tell my friends here in the States that I've got an Aussie friend that's got several customers in the United States, they go, how do they do that? It's because they know the customer and they're extending their boundaries. You don't have to be limited to some microcosm right now to run your company. You can grow your business outside of those boundaries. But I believe that you can only do that if your name goes viral in those particular spaces. So I would encourage you to consider that. Look at the type of businesses that you're working with. Find out where you have your strengths and weaknesses. Focus on the strengths and really start to drive your business along that area. The other side too is being knowledgeable about not only products, product selection, decorating techniques, the right suppliers that can do the right job, being loyal to the right suppliers, vetting people properly, vetting your suppliers and your clients properly so that you're working with the best of the best in the market space. That is going to save you, obviously, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the reality is this is going to save you an immense amount of time and potential frustration if you start thinking along these lines. So having an understanding, and you know what, I will say to the folks that are on this call, you're taking time away from your family and your business today, and you're doing something for yourself to educate yourself. And guess what? That I applaud you for. There's a lot of people that probably said, yeah, I'll sign up for it, and they didn't do it. And I'm not saying that being on this call with me is going to be a game changer for you. Hopefully there's going to be a tidbit or two that you take away and say, you know what, man, if I applied that one little thing, that could make a big difference in my business. So I applaud you for taking the time away today to do something for you, to make your business better. And that translates into helping your customers grow and be more strategic as well. So for that, I give you a lot of credit and I applaud you. The next thing is, and this is a big one for me, is the differentiation. Stop and ask yourself very directly, why would somebody want to write me a check? Why would somebody want to pay me to do what I do? If you are not different, if you are not unique, if you do not have a unique selling proposition, then the reality is you become very much like everyone else. Do a test. Go to the web and plug in some of your competitors and see how many similarities there are. See how many similarities there are in terms of the verbiage or nomenclature that they use in their website. Free samples, free artwork, best customer service. I laugh about that when people, I say, what is your differentiator? And people go, great customer service. I said, you know what? I mean, that's not a differentiator. I mean, if somebody said to me, what's unique about your house, Cliff? And I said, we have toilets. That's not a unique differentiator. It's what you should have. You should have great customer service in business. That's not a differentiator. Everybody says it. So when you look at the web, when you look at your collateral material, what would be the thing that would excite people about your brand? Why would people want to spend money with you? What makes you unique, different? What makes you stand out? Is it your marketing? How is your marketing? Is your marketing unique? When you go to market, do people look at this and go, I mean, do you create marketing? And this is what I try to do. When I create marketing for my speaking business or when I'm helping clients, I want to create things that when people get it, they go, whoa. And they want to sit down and they want to look at it multiple times. We create marketing that is engaging, that's different, that's unique. It's not just another pen. It's not just another catalog. It's something that engages them, involves their senses. It's unique. It's different. Because guess what? Only about 2 or 3% of the people in the industry will actually do this. The other 97%ers are doing it the same way that everybody else is. So what's unique? Because if everybody else is doing it the same, guess what? The client has one thing to rely on. Who can do it cheaper? Because you haven't shown them that there's anything else that's unique or different about you. It may be your strategy. It may be the way you go to market. It may be the fact that you're in 4 or 5 strategic vertical markets and your name is viral in that space, and that people are talking about you, that you're creating strategies for them to help them with their strategic pain points. Those are differentiators. It could be your education certification. I'm a big proponent of that. I'm a major proponent of that. I encourage people all the time, get your certification. And it's not enough to get the certification. Like I have the MAS Plus certification. It's not enough just to have it and put it next to your name. You have to market that. Why would I buy from you? It's because I have a level of expertise in this industry like not a lot of people. And you know, many of you on this call, if not all of you on this call, have the same educational background, have the same knowledge base. Are you letting your customers know that that's a differentiator for you? Are you talking to them about product safety and the importance of product safety other than what they already know? Or compliancy issues, dealing with vendors in China so that you're not dealing with companies that use child labor? Are you articulating this story? And we could go on and on and on about differentiating points. But if you're not looking at your business and constantly looking at how can we modify and change this business, then folks, you're doing yourself a disservice. There's a practice in Japan that's called Kaizen, and it's making things better, basically is what it is. And I remember there was a great speaker by the name of Jim Tunney. He was a National Football League referee, and he told the story about how that he believes that companies, he says that most people say that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He goes, his philosophy is if it ain't broke, break it and make it better. Now that doesn't mean dismantling your entire organization, but it means being intuitive, looking at your organization, seeing where you can lift it up in certain areas and make improvements. And each of those improvements will certainly become one of those differentiators that will absolutely set you apart in that market space. And believe me, you can't just do it. You have to articulate it. You have to demonstrate it. I often use the analogy, I love my wife. So if I tell my wife every day, hey, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, you're great, you're lovely, I love you. I mean, that's lip service. But if I demonstrate it by putting my arm around her, holding her hand, rubbing her back, giving her a kiss on the cheek goodnight, telling her that I love her and holding her, that demonstration of that love really goes a long way. And you can carry it over to the same principles here. You know, if I'm telling you, oh boy, you ought to be doing creative marketing, but yet I'm not doing it, I'm not demonstrating that. So you have to look at these things on how we can create this environment where people see us and perceive us as being totally different and unique from all of our competition. And folks, there's a lot of competition out there. I don't know that the Australasian market has the magnitude of distributors we have here, but I was talking to Kate and earlier today and was telling her that there's probably over 20,000 plus noted distributors in the U.S., not including the trophy dealers, the screen printers, the quick print shops, the guys that do car wraps and all that are dabbling in that. So we have a ridiculous amount of people that say they sell promo products. Boy, within all that quagmire, if you're not creating a difference, and I tell people this all the time, if you're not different, then you're the same. You're just like everybody else. And when you're like everybody else, when you draw it down to the bottom line is who can do it cheaper? So this differentiator is a real important thing. We also need to look at mitigating risks. You know, how do we mitigate risk within our business? That goes through client selection, your profitability, your cash flow, how you communicate, having proper staffing, vendor relations. Now, I'm sure many of you do this, but I would encourage you to, and we can do a whole nother seminar on this, and I'll talk to Kate. Maybe this will be one that we do put out there, but on market segmentation, how do you take your existing clients and classify them by vertical market? It's a great exercise if you haven't done this. Break them out by vertical market. And then after you break them out by vertical market, classify them A through F. F being the people that are bad pay, horrible to deal with, always beat you up for price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many of those people are on your list? And more importantly, if they called you tomorrow, would you take their order? You'll be very surprised if you segment your list, this A through F category, you'll really be able to see who are my top producers. And you want to find more of those people. You want to find more of the top A, B, and C listed customers that appreciate your value, pay on time, don't squabble on price, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I know many of you might say, well, those people are far and few between. Maybe. But the reality is we don't want to be going after the same F and E listed customers that are not going to drive profitability in our business. The reality is each of you on this call at minimum are worth $100 an hour. The question is, the next time you look at your client list, how many of those clients on there can you actually say that when I take the order, that's what I'm making? I'm making $100 worth of profit per every hour that I invest in them. So if you start looking at it in those terms, it really tends to get you to understand more the profitability and the cash side of this. How we communicate with our vendors, not doing things sloppy, making sure our purchase orders are clean, making sure that when we're having conversations with our customers that we're documenting these conversations, we're getting clear, concise understanding of what they want, what they say, and not assuming anything. And I'm guilty of this. Salespeople feel, oh, I've got it. I understand it. I know it. I've got it. You know what? Guess what? The reality is most of the time you don't. Get clarity. I'm an old guy now, so I need to ask questions. I need to write it down. I need to get clarity. And I will tell you that it has been it's been a lifesaver for my company on many, many occasions, just having that communication and that documentation in place. Making sure you have the right people doing the right job. You may have people doing stuff within your organization right now that, guess what? They would be better suited doing something over here. And by them doing that over there, it would just lift your company remarkably. So you need, as a business owner, it's tough. You need to start looking at this on a regular basis. Salespeople that you have, if they're not profitable, and here's the other thing. Don't say, boy, I wish they were more like me. Because if they were more like you, guess what? They'd have their own company. The reality is, how do we go about selecting the right people? How, once again, training, empowerment. How do we get them to understand how to sell more successfully and more profitably? We have the ability to do that if we have the proper staffing. And this also goes with vendor relations, vetting out the right people. There was a comedian in the States that once said, it was kind of funny. He said, somewhere in the world by process of elimination is the world's worst doctor. He said, it has to be. He says, the scary thing is somebody has an appointment with him tomorrow. And you have to think about this because it's true. Somewhere in your organization, in our organization, and in the industry as a whole is the world's worst supplier. You work tirelessly to build relationships with these different clients that you're working with, and then you hand it over. You relinquish that relationship over to a supplier. Make sure that you're vetted properly. Getting something for 13 cents cheaper or whatever may not be the ideal thing to do when it comes to making sure that you have the right vendor. So by doing all this and mitigating risks, it definitely enhances your cash flow and profitability, and that's the key. Save for the future. I think that there's a lot of folks that I know that that don't do this. They don't put aside X number of dollars per month for something that could go awry, something that could go sideways. So I encourage you, don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but it is important that you put some money aside for things that could come up in the future. Again, these are this is not a secret. I mean, I think we all know this, but the thing is, do we practice it? And I don't care what the amount is. If it's $50, $100 a month, do we put it aside? Or it's $100 a week, do we put it aside in the event that something happens that it doesn't dramatically or adversely affect our business? So again, very short slide here, but saving for the future. And lastly, I think it's important that we have fun. This is a great business. And I know a lot of people say, well, you know, I'm not in business to have fun. But at the end of the day, you really do want to work with people where when you go, look, we're going to deal with a lot of idiots during the course of our careers. There's no question. So we want to be able to minimize that. I want to go to work every day when I pick up the phone. I want to work with clients, my consulting clients that I enjoy spending time with, that are open to suggestions. They don't have to take everything that I say and say, oh, it's gospel. I want them to challenge me, but I want them to do it professionally. But I want to have fun when I'm working. When I say fun, maybe that's too much of a hokey word, but I want to enjoy what I'm doing. I want to enjoy the people that I'm working with. That's why it's so important for you to look for the best of the best customers, so that when you're dealing with them, they're excited to see you. You're excited to see them. You want to have staff members the same way. Your vendor selection the same way. You want to work with people that you enjoy working with and enjoy being around. You know what? I know at some level that's kind of pie in the sky, but at the end of the day, that's something that we should be striving for nonetheless. That's the end of my presentation. I know that there's, like I said, these aren't secrets necessarily. You look at these and go, wow, those are, maybe some of you are saying that that's kind of basic. And just at some level, it might be. But if nothing more, for some of you, it might be a huge wake-up call. For some of you, it may be just that little nudge that you need to go, wow, like I said earlier, that maybe if I put that into practice, or if I was a little bit more accountable, or if I re-looked at my staff, or I increased my profits, it could make a significant difference in my business. So that said, I'm going to turn this back over to Kate in a minute if there's any questions, but I do want to say that I encourage you, if you'd like, to please connect with me on my blog. I have a blog that I put out every week. I don't sell anything on there, so you won't have to worry about being sold to, but it's just an encouragement that I send out to folks once a week. It's a little business acumen to get your week going. And also connect with me on the various social media sites. And if you ever want to have a conversation with me, I'm available on Skype. Just send me an email. We'll set up a time. Obviously, I won't charge you for it, but if you want to just have a conversation, you have a question, something that I can help you with, I'm more than willing to help you. And I just want you to know that I'm grateful for the time that I've had with you today. And like I said, I hope that some of the points that I've shared with you today will resonate and help you grow your business. So with that said, I'll turn this back over to Kate if she has anything further to say or any questions. Kate?
Thank you, Cliff. I hope everyone got some great tips from that. There don't seem to be any questions, just one feedback that says great information, which is awesome. So yeah, as Cliff said, his details are on the screen if you have any questions for Cliff after, or if you want to connect. And as Cliff also mentioned during the webinar, he will be doing a few more webinars for us throughout the year, and the next one will be in May, so make sure you tune in for that one. Tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording of today's webinar and a link to view the slides. So on behalf of Cliff and APA, thank you for joining us today, and have a great afternoon, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.